She was worth $1.6 billion. Her husband thought she was worth even more as a payout. Listen to this. So when are you finally pulling the trigger on this thing? That was his best friend. The question hung in the air like smoke, casual, curious, the way men discussed fantasy football or vacation plans. 6 more months tops. My lawyer says if I file after her Q4 earnings report, the company valuation works in my favor. We are talking 9 figures, Iris, maybe more. That was her husband, Dominic, the man she had loved for 5 years, the man she had trusted with everything, and she is completely clueless about all of this. A woman's voice now, soft, intimate, the kind of voice that belonged in bedrooms, not speakerphones. Margot is brilliant with numbers. Dominic laughed, and the sound cut through the phone like a knife. But she is terrible with people. She believes what she wants to believe. I have been managing her for 5 years, keeping her happy, keeping her focused. She thinks we are building something together. I am just collecting my share. The line went quiet for a moment. Then the woman spoke again. And what about us, Dom? I am tired of waiting. His voice dropped, became something tender and hungry all at once. You are worth waiting for. That woman is everything. Margot is not. Sexy, spontaneous. God, the things she does. 6 more months, baby. Then we disappear. The villa in Positano, the yacht, no more pretending. No more watching her parade around boardrooms like she built everything herself. The phone was still connected, buried in his pocket, transmitting everything. And the woman listening on the other end, his wife, the billionaire he was planning to rob. Margot Westbrook stood in the kitchen of their Manhattan penthouse, rain streaking the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, city lights blurring like watercolors through the glass. Her phone was pressed to her ear. Her hand was steady. Her heartbeat was steady. But everything she thought she knew about her life had just collapsed. Now here is what most people would do in this moment. They would scream, they would cry, they would call him immediately, demand answers, throw accusations across phone lines like grenades. And you know what? They would be completely justified. But Margot Westbrook was not most people. She was the woman who had closed her first billion-dollar deal at 28. She was the woman who had survived hostile takeovers, market crashes, and a global pandemic that nearly destroyed the hospitality industry. She was the woman who had built 17 luxury hotels across 4 continents. And in that moment, standing barefoot on cold marble, listening to her husband plan her financial destruction with his girlfriend, she made a decision. She was not going to react, she was going to respond. And by the time she was finished, Dominic Cole would lose everything. His money, his reputation, his freedom, and the woman he thought was too stupid to see him clearly. What you are about to hear is a story about trust, about betrayal, about the kind of calculated cruelty that hides behind wedding rings and whispered promises. But more than that, it is a story about what happens when you underestimate someone who has been watching you far more carefully than you ever realized. If you have ever trusted someone completely, if you have ever wondered whether the person sleeping beside you is really who they claim to be, if you have ever been afraid that you might be missing something right in front of your face, then this story is for you. Stay with me until the end. Because the lesson Margot learned, the one that cost Dominic everything, is a lesson that could change your life. And if you are new here, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we tell stories like this every week. Stories about ordinary people who discover extraordinary strength when their backs are against the wall. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Margot Westbrook was not born a billionaire, she was born into one. Her grandfather had opened the first Westbrook Hotel in 1962, a modest property in Boston that catered to traveling businessmen and their families. Her father had expanded it into a regional chain, but Margot, she had transformed it into something else entirely. By the time she turned 36, Westbrook Holdings operated 17 luxury properties across 4 continents: New York, London, Dubai, Singapore, Tokyo. The Westbrook name had become synonymous with a certain kind of elegance, understated, refined, the sort of experience that attracted old money and new wealth alike. Margot had earned her seat at that table, not just through inheritance, But through the thousand small decisions that separate competent leadership from visionary success, she had navigated the 2008 financial crisis when she was barely out of business school. She had pivoted during the pandemic, converting 3 properties into long-term residential experiences that generated revenue while competitors shuttered. She had fought off 2 hostile takeover attempts and won both times. The business press called her brilliant. Her board called her indispensable. Her competitors called her ruthless. And her husband called her clueless. Dominic Cole had entered her life at a charity gala 6 years earlier. He was handsome in that easy, confident way that came from never having questioned his own appeal. Dark hair with threads of silver at the temples. Green eyes that crinkled when he smiled. The kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He had been working as a brand consultant for a mid-sized marketing firm. Nothing exceptional, but respectable. The kind of career that suggested ambition without intimidating anyone. Their courtship had been romantic in all the ways Margot had never expected. She was used to men who were intimidated by her success, men who bristled at her schedule, men who wanted her to be smaller than she was. Dominic seemed different. He was supportive, understanding. He never complained when she worked late. He never made her feel guilty for missed dinners or cancelled vacations. When he proposed after 18 months, he told her he had never met anyone like her, that he would spend the rest of his life making sure she knew how valued she was, that he wanted to be her partner in everything. She had believed him. After the wedding, Dominic had suggested stepping back from his own career to support hers. A strategic decision, he called it. Why should they both work insane hours when his salary was a rounding error compared to her income? He could manage their household, handle personal affairs, be the stable presence she could rely on when business consumed her attention. It had seemed generous at the time, selfless even. She understands now that it was the first move in a very long game. For 5 years, Dominic Cole had played the role of devoted husband. He attended her corporate events with charm and grace. He entertained her colleagues and clients with warmth and wit. He asked questions about her work, showing interest without interference. He managed their social calendar, their household staff, their personal logistics with quiet efficiency. He never asked about the finances. As long as his credit cards worked, as long as the lifestyle continued, he seemed perfectly content to let her handle the numbers. And all that time, he had been building something else entirely. That night in the penthouse kitchen, the phone call still burning in her ears, Margot forced herself to think clearly. The conversation she had overheard told her several things. First, Dominic had a girlfriend, someone named Iris. Second, they had been together long enough to discuss villas and yachts and disappearing together. Third, he had lawyers involved. Fourth, he was timing something around her Q4 earnings report. He was planning to divorce her, and he was planning to take half of everything she had. In California, where they had been married, community property law was clear. Everything acquired during the marriage could be split 50-50. Everything she had built, every dollar she had earned, every property she had developed since the wedding, he would be entitled to half $1.6 billion. $800 million for him, for doing nothing but playing the supportive husband for 5 years. She stood at the window, watching rain slide down glass, watching the city lights blur and reform, and she felt something shift inside her. The grief would come later. The rage would come later. But in that moment there was only clarity. He thought she was brilliant with numbers and terrible with people. He was half right. Margot picked up her phone and opened her contacts. She scrolled to a name she rarely used but never deleted. Rowan Pierce, she typed a message. I need you at the penthouse tonight. Do not tell anyone bring your equipment. The response came in seconds. On my way. Rowan Pierce arrived 2 hours later. He was 52, silver-haired, built like someone who had spent decades in places where physical capability was the difference between survival and disaster. He had worked for her father for 10 years before transitioning to private consulting. Now he handled security matters for Westbrook Holdings and occasionally for Margot personally. He had clearances she did not ask about. He had skills she preferred not to examine, and he had one quality that made him invaluable: absolute discretion. He took one look at her face when she opened the door and set down the silver briefcase he was carrying. What happened? Margot handed him her phone. She had saved the recording before Dominic could realize his mistake. 37 minutes of audio. Most of it useless background noise. 7 minutes that mattered. Listen to this. Start at the 12-minute mark. Rowan sat at the kitchen island, connected headphones, and pressed play. Margot watched his face as he listened. His expression never changed. When it ended, he removed the headphones and looked at her. How much does he think you are worth? 1.6 billion, give or take. He expects half, and how much is he actually entitled to? Margot pulled a folder from beneath a stack of magazines on the counter. Inside were documents she had never shown Dominic, documents he did not know existed. My grandmother established a family trust before I was born. It holds the majority of my stake in Westbrook Holdings. The appreciation in value during our marriage has been redirected into a charitable foundation that I control but do not own. The properties, all of them, are heavily mortgaged because I used them as collateral for the Singapore expansion. On paper, I am leveraged to the limit. Rowan studied the documents for a long moment. Then he looked up. He signed a prenuptial agreement. He did. His lawyer reviewed it at the time and apparently found it acceptable. Dominic never read the details himself. He trusted his lawyer, and his lawyer either missed the implications or did not care to explain them. So what is he actually entitled to? If we divorce tomorrow, maybe 200,000. After legal fees, probably less. Rowan closed the folder. Does he know any of this? He has never asked a single question about our finances. As long as his lifestyle continued, he was content to let me handle everything. A faint smile crossed Rowan's face. What do you need from me? Margot sat down across from him. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were clear. I need to know everything about the girlfriend, about his lawyers, about whatever money he has been moving. He mentioned offshore accounts. He mentioned planning. I need to know exactly what he has been doing, and I need to know it before he has any idea I am looking. Rowan nodded. How long do I have? He said 6 months until he files. I want to be ready in 6 weeks. Rowan opened his briefcase, revealing equipment Margot did not recognize and did not need to. I will have preliminary findings in 72 hours, full picture in 2 weeks. One more thing. Margot met his eyes. I need this done quietly. No traces. Nothing that can come back to me. That is how I always work. He left at midnight. Margot stood at the window for a long time after he was gone, watching the rain, thinking about the man who'd be coming home in a few hours, crawling into bed beside her, kissing her forehead, telling her he loved her. She would smile. She would tell him she loved him too. She would lie beside him in the dark and listen to him breathe, and she would wait. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Margot's life. Every morning she woke beside Dominic and forced herself to behave normally. She kissed him goodbye when he left for his morning tennis game. She texted him throughout the day with mundane updates about meetings and schedules. She came home in the evenings and listened to him talk about his day, his plans, his ideas for their future, and every word out of his mouth was a lie. She noticed things now that she had never paid attention to before. The way his phone was always face down on the table, the way he excused himself to take calls in another room, the way his eyes flickered, just for a moment, when she mentioned long-term investments or estate planning. He was good, she had to admit. 5 years of performance without a single slip. If his phone had not stayed connected that night, if she had hung up just a few seconds earlier, she would still be living inside his fiction. The thought made her physically ill, but she did not show it. She played her part as flawlessly as he played his. The loving wife, the trusting partner, the woman who believed in the life they were building together, and all the while Rowan was working. His first report arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered in person to her office at Westbrook Holdings. Margot closed her door, instructed her assistant to hold all calls, and sat down to read. What she found made her go very still. Dominic had opened offshore accounts 18 months earlier. 2 shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, one in Luxembourg. The registered agent was a law firm in Zurich that specialized in privacy solutions for high-net-worth individuals, the kind of firm that helped people hide money from spouses, creditors, and governments. He had been moving funds for over a year. Small transfers, irregular timing, designed to avoid detection. Most of it came from the joint accounts Margot funded. The household expenses, travel budgets, and discretionary spending she had allocated without oversight. The total amount moved so far was $2.7 million. But that was not the worst part. The woman's name was Iris Callahan, 34 years old. Former model who now ran a boutique PR firm in Beverly Hills. She lived in a condominium in Malibu that was valued at $5 million. A condominium that Dominic had purchased in cash 8 months earlier and registered in her name. Margot stared at the documents for a long time. $5 million. Cash in another woman's name. Where had he found $5 million in cash? The answer came on page 12, 3 years earlier, before their last anniversary, before the Singapore deal, before so many of the moments Margot had believed were real. Dominic had accessed her private calendar through a shared family account. He had been tracking her meetings, her deals, her acquisition targets. And 3 weeks before she had announced the Singapore expansion, he had purchased stock in every company she was planning to acquire, insider trading, using information stolen from her personal files. Margot sat back in her chair. Her hands were trembling, not with fear, with rage. He had been using her from the very beginning. Every dinner conversation where she had discussed work, every late night where she had worried out loud about acquisitions and negotiations, he had been listening, not as a supportive partner, as a thief. The profits from his trades totaled $6.3 million. The stock was held in accounts registered to the shell companies. The $5 million condo for Iris. $2.7 million moved offshore. The rest presumably earmarked for their life together after the divorce. He had stolen her information, used it to make himself rich, and hidden everything in a maze of offshore accounts and girlfriend properties. And he had done it all while sleeping beside her, telling her he loved her, making her believe she was the most important person in his world. Margot picked up her phone and called Rowan. "I need you back in my office." Now 20 minutes later, Rowan sat across from her, reviewing the documents she had spread across her desk. "This changes things," he said. "Yes, it does. The insider trading alone is federal SEC violations, potential criminal charges. If this comes out, he is not just losing a divorce settlement. He is losing his freedom." Margot was quiet for a moment. "What about Iris? What do we know about her business?" "That is what I wanted to talk to you about." Rowan pulled out another folder. "Her PR firm on paper. It looks legitimate. Small client roster, modest revenue, nothing exceptional. But when I dug deeper, the numbers did not add up." "What do you mean?" "She has income streams that have no visible source. Wire transfers from companies that do not appear to do any actual business. Either she is very creative with accounting, or that PR firm is a front for something else entirely. Money laundering, possibly. I am still digging. But if I am right, and if Dominic has been routing money through her operation, this gets much bigger than a cheating husband." Margot stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out before her, towers of glass and steel, empires built and destroyed every day. "How much longer do you need?" "Give me another week. I want to be thorough. When you are finished, I want everything. Every document, every transaction, every communication. I want a file so complete that when I walk into that courtroom, there is nothing he can say." Rowan nodded. "What are you planning?" Margot turned back to face him. "In 6 weeks, the Westbrook Foundation holds its annual gala. 500 guests. CEOs, politicians, celebrities, every major player in New York society. Dominic will be there. He always is, playing the devoted husband, enjoying the spotlight. And that is where I am going to end him." Rowan studied her for a long moment. "You are not just going to file for divorce." Margot's voice was quiet. "Cold filing for divorce would be too easy. He would disappear to Europe with his girlfriend and his stolen money, and I would spend years fighting lawyers while he lived on a yacht in the Mediterranean. So what are you going to do? I am going to make sure everyone knows exactly who he is, his friends, his contacts, every person who ever shook his hand at one of my events. I am going to show them the documents, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the insider trading. She paused. And then I am going to hand everything to the sec. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. Remind me never to cross you. You would not have the chance. The next 4 weeks were the strangest of Margot's life. She continued playing her role, loving wife, devoted partner. The woman who had no idea her husband was counting down the days until he could file for divorce and collect his payment. But behind the performance, something else was happening. Every day, new information arrived. Rowan's team had traced the money through a dozen different accounts, shell companies and financial instruments. They had documented every trade Dominic had made, using her insider information. They had mapped out his relationship with Iris, including airline tickets, hotel receipts and jewelry purchases that appeared on credit cards Margot had never seen. He had been living an entire other life. For years, meanwhile, Margot assembled her own team, lawyers who specialized in complex divorce litigation, forensic accountants who could present financial crimes in terms a jury would understand, a PR consultant who would manage the inevitable media fallout. She briefed all of them under strict confidentiality agreements. She showed them the evidence. She walked them through her plan. None of them tried to talk her out of it. If you are enjoying this story, I want you to take a second right now and hit that like button. Let me know you are invested in what happens next. And if you have ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you, where they thought they had you figured out, drop a comment below telling me about it. I read every single one. Now, let me tell you what happened next. 6 days before the gala, Margot filed for divorce. She did it quietly, through a separate law firm that Dominic had never encountered. The filing was strategic, time to establish certain facts before the public confrontation, the date of separation, the identification of marital versus separate property, the preliminary financial disclosures that would reveal exactly how little Dominic was entitled to receive. He had no idea. He was still checking his calendar, counting down to the moment he would file, still meeting with his lawyers, refining his strategy, still sleeping beside her every night, kissing her goodbye every morning, planning his escape. 5 days before the gala, Margot met with her attorneys to review the final documents. You understand what you are doing, her lead lawyer said. Once you make this public, there is no walking it back. I understand. He could countersue. Claim defamation, emotional distress, make your life very difficult. He could try, but everything I am going to say is documented fact. Bank records, wire transfers, stock trades, communications with his attorneys. I have evidence for every single claim. The lawyer nodded slowly. All right then, we are ready when you are. 3 days before the gala, Margot made one final visit to Rowan. Is everything in place? Security is confirmed. My team will be positioned throughout the venue. When you give the signal, they will prevent him from approaching the stage. And the AV setup. Your documents will be queued on the main screen. I have personally verified the system. It will work. What about Iris? Rowan smiled. She received an invitation 2 weeks ago. Guest of a catering company that provides services for your hotels. She has confirmed attendance. Does she know why? She thinks it is a networking opportunity. Good. Margot looked at the evidence spread across the table. Months of investigation, years of betrayal, everything that Dominic had done, laid out in black and white. There is one more thing, she said. Name it. After tonight, he is going to try to contact me. He is going to want to negotiate, explain, bargain. I need you to make sure that does not happen. You want him blocked from all communication. I want him to understand that the conversation is over, that there is nothing left to discuss. Can you do that? Rowan nodded. Consider it done. The night before the gala, Margot stood alone in her penthouse. Dominic was out. Another client dinner, he had said. Probably another evening with Iris, planning their future together. She walked through the rooms they had shared for 5 years, the living room where they had hosted parties, the dining room where they had celebrated anniversaries, the bedroom where she had lain beside him believing every word he said. It all felt different now, like a stage set being dismantled after the final performance. She thought about their wedding day, the vows he had spoken with such conviction, the promises that had meant nothing, the life she had thought they were building, brick by brick, only to discover the foundation was sand. Had he ever loved her, even a little? She did not know. She would never know, and she realized, standing there in the quiet darkness, that it did not matter anymore. What mattered was what happened next. She went to bed early that night. Dominic came home after midnight, slipping under the covers with practiced silence. He put his arm around her, pulled her close, whispered that he loved her. She lay very still and waited for morning. The day of the Westbrook Foundation Gala arrived with clear skies and perfect autumn light. Margot spent the morning in final preparations, hair, makeup, the small rituals of transformation. Her stylist had selected a black gown that cost more than most people made in a year. Sleeveless, floor-length, with a train that would whisper across marble floors, elegant and devastating. Dominic watched her dress with obvious appreciation. "You look incredible." "Thank you. Tonight is going to be big," he said. "I can feel it." She turned to face him. He was wearing the tuxedo she had bought for him last month, Italian cut, perfect fit. He looked like a man who had never struggled for anything in his life. "Yes," she managed a smile, "tonight is going to be big." They rode to the venue together in silence that Dominic interpreted as companionable. The Westbrook Hotel's Manhattan flagship property rose before them, all glass and light, 500 guests already gathering in the grand ballroom. Cameras flashed as they stepped onto the red carpet. Margot smiled, posed, answered the expected questions about the foundation's work. Dominic stood beside her, hand on her waist, playing his role with practiced charm. Inside, the ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across white tablecloths and golden chairs. A full orchestra played softly in the corner. Servers in black circulated with champagne and canapes. 500 people, CEOs, politicians, celebrities, old money and new wealth. Everyone who mattered in New York society had gathered to support the Westbrook Foundation's mission of children's education and healthcare, and none of them had any idea what was about to happen. Margot and Dominic worked the room together, as they always did. He introduced her to people she had known for 20 years. He laughed at jokes she had heard 1,000 times. He kept his hand on her back like a claim, guiding her from conversation to conversation. She let him. At 8:30, she spotted Iris near the bar. The woman was beautiful. There was no denying it. Blonde, polished, wearing a silver dress that cost more than her documented salary should allow. She was chatting with a vendor Margot recognized, unaware that her presence had been carefully arranged. Margot felt nothing, no jealousy, no rage, only the cold clarity of what was coming. At 8:45, the Foundation's executive director took the stage to begin the evening's formal program. There would be remarks from board members, video presentations about the Foundation's impact, recognition of major donors, and then Margot would speak. She watched the program unfold from her seat in the front row. Dominic sat beside her, his hand resting on her knee, his attention wandering around the room as various speakers droned through their prepared remarks. He had no idea this would be the last public event they would ever attend together. At 9:15, the executive director returned to the microphone. "And now, please welcome the chair of our board, the driving force behind everything we do, Margot Westbrook." Applause filled the ballroom as Margot rose from her seat. She smoothed the front of her gown, touched Dominic's shoulder briefly, and walked to the stage. The climb to the podium felt longer than usual. Each step deliberate, each breath measured. She was aware of every detail, the weight of the spotlight, the rustle of her train against the marble stairs, the faces turned toward her, expectant, respectful. She reached the microphone. The applause faded. 500 people waited for her to speak. "Thank you." Her voice was steady, carrying easily through the room. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Your presence means more than I can express." As she paused. "Let the moment breathe. Because of you, 12,000 children will receive scholarships this year." Because of you, 3 new hospitals will open in underserved communities around the world. Because of you, lives are being transformed. And that is worth celebrating. More applause. She acknowledged it with a small nod. But tonight, I want to talk about something more personal. The room shifted subtly. People leaned forward. Curiosity replaced polite attention. 5 years ago, I married a man I believed loved me. A man who said he wanted to be my partner in everything, who promised to stand beside me through all of life's challenges. I believed him. I trusted him completely. Her eyes found Dominic in the front row. He was smiling, that easy, confident smile she had fallen in love with, but something flickered behind his eyes. Tonight I want to acknowledge his contribution to my life. Dominic's smile widened. He straightened in his chair, preparing to receive public praise. Over the past 5 years, my husband has worked very hard. She paused. Not on our marriage, of course. On his exit strategy. The smile froze on his face. What you are about to see on the screen behind me are documents I obtained through a forensic investigation of my husband's financial activities over the past 3 years. She pressed a button on the small remote in her hand. The screen behind her changed. Bank statements appeared, account numbers, wire transfers. These are records of shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg, companies my husband created to hide money from me, money he took from our joint accounts. Over $2.7 million transferred offshore in the past 18 months. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dominic's face drained of color. The registered agent for these companies is a law firm in Zurich that specializes in helping people hide assets from their spouses. I have copies of all correspondence between my husband and this firm. It makes for interesting reading. She clicked to the next slide. More documents. This is a deed for a $5 million condominium in Malibu, purchased in cash 8 months ago. The buyer is my husband. The registered owner is a woman named Iris Callahan. His girlfriend for the past 3 years gasps from the audience, heads turning, searching for someone who might match that name. She is here tonight, actually, near the bar. In the silver dress, please wave, Iris. Let everyone see who helped my husband plan to steal half my fortune. Near the back of the room, a blonde woman in silver stood up abruptly, face white, looking for an exit. Security personnel, positioned throughout the venue, moved subtly to block her path. Miss Callahan runs a boutique par firm in Beverly Hills, on paper at least. My investigators have found significant irregularities in her company's finances. Wire transfers with no clear business purpose. Income streams from entities that do not appear to exist. We have shared this information with the appropriate federal authorities. Margot clicked to the next slide, stock purchase records. But the financial fraud is only part of the story. 3 years ago, my husband accessed my private calendar through a shared family account. He has been tracking my meetings, my acquisition targets, my confidential business dealings, and using that information to trade stocks. The room went absolutely silent. 3 weeks before I announced the Westbrook Holdings expansion into Singapore, my husband purchased shares in every company I was planning to acquire. The profits from those trades totaled $6.3 million. This is textbook insider trading, which is a federal crime. She looked directly at Dominic now. He was gripping the arms of his chair, face grey, mouth opening and closing without producing sound. I have already provided this evidence to the Securities and Exchange Commission. They are very interested in speaking with my husband. So is the FBI. Dominic stood suddenly, knocking his chair backward. He took a step toward the stage. 2 security guards materialized at his sides, hands pressing firmly against his shoulders, guiding him back. Please remain seated, Mr. Cole. Margot's voice was calm. You will have ample opportunity to explain yourself to the authorities. She turned back to the crowd. Here is what is going to happen next. I filed for divorce 6 days ago. The proceedings are already underway. Because my husband was so concerned about timing his filing around my Q4 earnings report, I took the liberty of filing first. She clicked to another slide. Financial summary documents. Under the terms of our prenuptial agreement, which my husband apparently never read carefully, inherited assets and their appreciation are excluded from marital property distribution. The majority of my stake in Westbrook Holdings is held in a family trust that predates our marriage. The increase in value during our marriage has been directed to a charitable foundation that I control but do not own. My husband cannot touch it. She paused. Furthermore, every property he thought I owned outright is heavily mortgaged. I used them as collateral for business expansion. On paper, I am leveraged to the limit. After legal fees and proper valuation, my husband is entitled to approximately $189,000. She let the number hang in the air, not the $800 million he was expecting. Another murmur through the crowd. Someone near the back actually laughed. I have also filed a civil suit for recovery of the funds he transferred without my knowledge or consent. $2.7 million plus interest and damages, combined with the tax liability for his undisclosed income and the legal fees he will incur defending himself against federal charges, my husband is likely to exit this marriage with essentially nothing. She straightened the documents on the podium, a gesture of finality. One more thing. I want to be clear about something. I am not doing this out of spite. I am not doing this for revenge. I am doing this because accountability matters, trust matters. When someone betrays that trust so completely, so deliberately, so cruelly, there must be consequences. Her voice softened slightly. I loved my husband, or at least I loved the person I believed him to be. Finding out that person never existed has been the most painful experience of my life, but I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to let someone profit from their deception, and I refuse to stay silent while he moves on to destroy someone else. She looked at Dominic one final time. You told your friends that I was brilliant with numbers, but terrible with people. That I believed what I wanted to believe. You were half right. I did believe what I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe you were real. She paused. But here is what you never understood, Dominic. I grew up watching my father build an empire. I learned to read people before I learned to read contracts. I let you think you were winning because I was waiting to see if you would prove me wrong, if you would show me something real. Her voice dropped. You did not. She stepped away from the podium. The room was absolutely silent. No one seemed to breathe. Margot descended the stairs from the stage, her train whispering behind her. The crowd parted as she walked through the ballroom, a path opening spontaneously, instinctively. When she reached Dominic, she stopped. He was still held by security, though he had stopped struggling. His face was a mask of shock and fury and something else. Fear. She leaned close, speaking softly enough that only he could hear. You said you were managing me. You were wrong. I was managing you. I just let you think you were winning. She straightened. Goodbye, Dominic. She walked past him without looking back. Behind her, the room erupted. Voices, movement, the chaos of 500 people processing what they had just witnessed. Photographers rushed forward. Journalists shouted questions. Security worked to maintain order. Margot kept walking through the ballroom, through the lobby, into the waiting car that would take her home. She sat alone in the back seat as the city blurred past the windows. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving something hollow in its wake. She had done it. Every moment of planning, every week of pretending, every painful day of living beside the man who wanted to destroy her. It was over. But if you are waiting for her to feel triumphant, she did not. She felt tired, emptied out, like someone who had survived a battle they never asked to fight. The victory was complete. But victory, she was learning, felt different than she had imagined. What happens after the explosion? That is the question nobody asks when they imagine this kind of moment. The dramatic confrontation, the public destruction, the enemy vanquished, the truth revealed, justice served. But life does not end with the climax. There is always a morning after, and then another one, and another for Dominic Cole. Those mornings were brutal. The divorce proceedings moved quickly given the circumstances. His attorneys, initially confident, became increasingly desperate as the full scope of evidence emerged. Every argument they raised was countered by documentation. Every strategy they proposed collapsed against the wall of facts. Margot, had assembled. He tried to contest the prenuptial agreement, failed. He claimed the trust structure was invalid, rejected. He argued that the insider trading accusations were fabricated. The SEC disagreed. Within 4 months, the divorce was finalized. Dominic Cole received $89,000 after all deductions and fees, not quite the $800 million he had been anticipating. But the money was only the beginning of his problems. The SEC investigation resulted in formal charges of securities fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. Stock trades perfectly timed to non-public information, communications documenting his access to confidential business strategies, a pattern of behavior spanning 3 years. His attorneys negotiated a plea deal. He would plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for cooperation and testimony against others involved in the scheme. Others, as it turned out, included Iris Callahan. Her boutique PR firm was not, in fact, a legitimate business. It was a front for money laundering operations that extended far beyond one unfaithful husband, international networks, suspicious wire transfers, clients who existed only on paper. When federal investigators began pulling at those threads, the entire structure unraveled. Iris faced her own charges. Her Malibu condominium was seized. Her accounts were frozen. The life she had planned with Dominic, the villa in Positano, the yacht, the happily ever after built on stolen money, it disappeared like smoke. And Dominic, he pleaded guilty to securities, fraud and money laundering conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in federal prison, not the maximum, given his cooperation, but enough to destroy everything he had built, everything he had stolen, everything he had dreamed of taking. Margot followed the proceedings from a distance. She did not attend the hearings. She did not issue statements to the press. She let her attorneys handle the legal matters, and her PR team managed the public narrative. The story predictably became a sensation. The betrayed billionaire wife, the scheming husband. The dramatic public confrontation at a charity gala, every tabloid, every business publication, every morning show wanted the exclusive. Margot declined them all. She had not done this for attention. She had not done it for revenge, not really. She had done it because there had been no other choice, because letting him win would have meant letting him destroy her, because some betrayals are so complete that silence becomes complicity. Now it was over, and she needed to figure out what came next. The months after the divorce were strange ones. Margot had expected to feel liberated. Instead, she felt unmoored. The structures that had organized her life, the marriage, the partnership, the future they were supposedly building together, were gone. In their place was only emptiness. She threw herself into work, as she always did. The Singapore expansion was progressing well. The foundation's programs were exceeding their goals. The company was thriving under her leadership. But at night, alone in the penthouse they had shared, she found herself asking questions she could not answer. Had he ever loved her, even in the beginning, or had the entire relationship been a performance from the first moment? She would never know. He would never tell her the truth, and she would never ask. Some questions were not meant to be answered. She started seeing a therapist. A quiet office in Midtown once a week, an hour of trying to make sense of what had happened. The therapist did not offer easy answers. She asked questions instead, about trust, about intuition, about what Margot had known or suspected or chosen not to see. It was painful work. Margot was not accustomed to examining her own blind spots, but she forced herself through it anyway. Slowly something began to shift. She realized that the betrayal, as devastating as it had been, had revealed something important. She had spent so many years building her empire that she had neglected to build the skills that mattered in relationships. She had trusted Dominic because she wanted to trust someone, because she was tired of being alone at the top, because she needed to believe that someone could love her for who she was, not for what she could provide. He had exploited that need, but the need itself was not wrong. It was human, and she could learn from it without being destroyed by it. 6 months after the gala, Margot stood on the rooftop terrace of the Westbrook Hotel Singapore, watching the sun set over the marina. The building was her vision made real: sustainable design, local artisanship, a commitment to the community that went beyond branding. It was beautiful, and it was hers, Rowan Pierce had flown in for the opening ceremony. He stood beside her now, watching the same sunset, holding a glass of whiskey she had poured him herself. "How does it feel?" he asked. Margot considered the question. "Different than I expected." "How so?" "I thought finishing the Singapore project would feel like a victory. Another conquest, another proof that I could build things other people only dreamed about. But standing here now, I realize that is not what matters." "What does matter?" She turned to face him. "Understanding why I build things, what I am trying to prove, and to whom. I spent so many years running towards success without asking what I was running from. And now I know. I was running from loneliness, from the fear that no one would ever see the real me, from the suspicion that if they did see me, they would not stay." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "That is a hard thing to admit." "Yes, it is, but it is also freeing. Because once you know what you are afraid of, you can stop letting the fear control you." She looked back at the sunset. "I am not going to marry again. I do not need to. I do not need someone else to complete me or validate me or make me feel whole. I am whole already. I just did not know it." Rowan raised his glass. "To wholeness then, to wholeness then." They drank in companionable silence as the sun slipped below the horizon. In the years that followed, Margot's story became something more than a tabloid sensation. It became a kind of legend passed from person to person, woman to woman. The billionaire wife who caught her cheating husband, who did not crumble or flee or accept her fate, who turned his own weapons against him and won. Women reached out to her, dozens at first, then hundreds. Women who had been through similar betrayals, women who were trapped in marriages that had become cages, women who wondered if they were strong enough to fight back. She answered every message she could, not with advice necessarily, just with recognition, just with the simple acknowledgement that they were not alone. Eventually she formalized this work. The Westbrook Foundation expanded its mission to include programs for financial literacy, legal resources for domestic abuse survivors, and support networks for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. It was not what she had planned when she started the foundation, but it felt right, it felt necessary. Some nights late in her office, after everyone else had gone home, she would think about Dominic. Not with anger anymore, not even with sadness, just with a kind of distant curiosity. Where was he now? What was he doing? Had he learned anything from his destruction, or had he simply moved on to the next scheme, the next mark, the next fiction? She did not know. She did not care to find out. What mattered was what she had learned about trust, about intuition, about the difference between loving someone and needing them, about the strength that comes from knowing your own value, and about the danger of underestimating the person standing right in front of you. Now, before I let you go, I want to share something important. This story is not just about revenge. It is not just about catching a cheater or winning a divorce settlement or watching a bad person get what they deserve. It is about something deeper than that. It is about knowing yourself, really knowing yourself, your worth, your vulnerabilities, your blind spots, your strengths. Dominic Cole did not fail because Margot was richer than him, or smarter than him, or luckier than him. He failed because he did not see her clearly. He saw what he wanted to see, a target, a mark, a woman too focused on her career to notice what was happening right under her nose. He was wrong, and his wrongness destroyed him. There is a lesson in that, for all of us. The people who underestimate us reveal their own limitations. The people who think they have us figured out are usually the ones who understand us least. The people who believe they are managing us, manipulating us, controlling us, they are building their own defeat, brick by brick, without even realizing it. Our job is not to convince them otherwise. Our job is not to prove ourselves to people who have already decided what we are worth. Our job is simply to know the truth about ourselves, to understand our own value, to protect what matters and prepare for what might come. And when someone tries to take advantage of that, when someone mistakes our kindness for weakness or our trust for stupidity, we do not have to destroy them. We just have to stop pretending, because when you stop pretending, the truth takes care of itself. If this story moved you, if it made you think about trust or strength or what you would do in Margot's position, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment sharing the most important lesson you are taking away from this story. What would you have done differently? What would you have done the same? And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about ordinary people who discover extraordinary strength when it matters most. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. A friend who is going through something difficult. A family member who has been underestimated. Anyone who might need to remember that the person who underestimates them has already lost. They just do not know it yet. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And remember, the most dangerous opponent is not the one who comes at you with everything they have. It is the one who lets you think you are winning. Until next time.